Cool. We'll go ahead and get started then. Hi, everybody. My name is Ann, for those of you who don't know me. Thank you for coming to my little talk. I have some thoughts about making micro-budget feature films that I'm going to share, and I think this will be roughly the time that I should be talking, but who knows, it might be really short and then we'll do a lot of questions, or it might be really long and we'll just rush through it. We're going to find out. I think it'll be fun. But hi, yes, my name is Gillies, and I made a feature film a couple of years ago called Kringle Time, which, thank you. Which someone on IMDb called a candidate for the worst movie ever. Simply a pointless movie, complete waste of all resources. So those are my credentials. Someone else also called it far bleaker than might be expected from a broad comedy, which was exactly what I was going for. And this person on Letterboxd said, I'd probably go this way if I had to wear a big fuzzy mascot suit. I wouldn't last a day as a furry without initiating some kind of hostage situation, which might be the best review I've ever gotten for anything, and makes me very interested in their own personal life. So, these are my credentials. I also co-wrote and produced a film called 500 Fireflies over the summer that is currently in post-production with one of my personal favorite character actors, Richard Reilly, who most famously was the guy from Office Space who got hit by a car, if you guys have seen that. Or if you've seen any movie from the 90s, he's the guy with the mustache that shows up and says something. So first of all, I just want to start out by talking about kind of like what level of film we're talking about here. So really, what is a micro-budget feature film? And there's a wide range of kind of definitions of this. What we're going to be talking about today is we're not talking about studio low budget. We're not talking about the levels of, if you guys have seen any of the panels with Milan Chakraborty, he says that what he's doing is micro budget filmmaking. He's fancier than what we're going to be talking about today. He's more of a go-getter. We're not on the Milan Chakraborty level here. What we're talking about here today is going to be, how can you make a movie for just far less money than you actually need to make a movie. But the exciting thing about the world that we're in right now is the fact that that you can make a movie. Anybody can make a movie in a way that is way more accessible than it was 10 or 20, especially 20 years ago. You know, Robert Rodriguez, when he made El Mariachi in '89, made it for $7,000, which I'm not sure what the equivalent would be today. But that was just like an unheard of thing. And all of his money went to film and, renting the camera, renting the gear, all of that stuff. Anybody today has access to a camera that if you know how to use it, you can make a film, And it is all about, I'm not saying you should be like, oh yeah, I'll just shoot on my phone, because what's the difference? But it's all about knowing how to use the tools that you have at your disposal. And the thing that is really exciting right now is that there is this incredible democratization of the technology of film in a way that really means that anybody can make a micro-budget feature film. So it's all about the question of knowing to use what you have. So that's the level we're going to be talking about today. So Kringle Time we shot for, I want to say probably all in around $50,000 in terms of actual spent money. We had about $30,000 for production itself. And then after post and various licensing fees and sales agents and all that stuff, it was probably up to around 50,000 pickups and all that stuff. That's the total kind of like out of pocket that we had. If you factor in favors, if you factor in time that that people put in that they weren't getting paid for, Ted Hogeman, for one, was the sound designer and the sound mixer on the film. He worked for a rate that would, did you even work for a rate? You just showed up, just like did all of this stuff for free. That 50,000 does not include all of that. If you factor in all of that and all of the talented people giving their time and money and effort and all of that stuff, this was a $500,000 film. And I think that's an important thing to remember, when you are doing this, that those are not costs that are insignificant. And they all come from just making friends with people and just being, I mean, Ted and I went to college together, and then we called him up and went, hey, let's make a movie. And I worked on his stuff, so he worked on my stuff. So in the process of making these films and the other stuff that I've worked on, I figured out several absolutely do's and several absolutely do nots of how to get through this process while maintaining a semblance of your sanity. So we're going to talk about that today. So without further ado, the absolute do's and absolute do nots of making a micro-budget feature film. Number one, absolutely do not make a micro-budget feature film. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you. How great would that have been, though, if I did just walk out and nobody ever saw me again? That's the type of power move that I aspire to. No, there's a reason I wanted to start out with, but I will rephrase it in a slightly different way. Absolutely do know what you're getting yourself into, because this is going to be, it's a lot to make a feature-length film. And it's not something I would advise straight off the bat. Especially if you're like just graduating college, there's this idea of like, well, I've made a couple of shorts, in school, and now the next thing to do is to do a feature because I just want to do a longer thing. I would not totally advise that. I would say, I feel like there's an important middle step between those, which is you've got a bunch of shorts that, I mean, like when I was here, I made tons of shorts, and we, put a couple of weekends into them, and we would just shoot stuff and we put it together. And that's great. Stuff like 24 speed, it makes you produce stuff and you just put stuff out there. And that's really important. But at the same time, there was a mid-level short film of really, really planning and putting all the necessary resources into a short film that I think is really important before you get to the feature level. So before I did Kringle Time, I did a short thesis film for when I was in grad school. It's about a 20 to 18 minute short film. That was the first time that really I'd sat down and went, okay, I'm gonna put all of the necessary resources into how do I make this film as good as possible? And I want something that I can really show someone and go, this represents me. And that was a really fundamentally different experience from making a 10-minute film with my friends, and that gives you a slight taste of what it's like to make a 90-minute film, which is just exponentially harder, So know what you're getting yourself into, do some practice runs on this stuff, and be aware that this is going to be a long and grueling effort. And unless you're in love with the premise and the script, you're gonna get tired. You're gonna get tired anyway. I'm not trying to dissuade you guys. I'm just saying I don't want you to end up halfway through this production and then go like, oh God. And then you're at the sunk cost fallacy kind of situation at that point. So know what you're getting yourself into. So we're going to go through kind of step by step. So we're going to start with pre-production, kind of writing and development, which especially for something at this level is a massively important stage. For any film, it's a massively important stage, because if you don't have a good script, you don't have a good film. Like that's what it comes down to, no matter how much time and energy you put into it. So number 3, absolutely do not rush the script into production before it's ready. This was the biggest problem that we had with Kringle Time, is that we were very much in a do mentality, which was my buddy Matt, who directed it. I was having a beer with him one night and he said, hey, I want to direct a feature film. Do you want to write a feature film? And I was like, sure. All right, let's do it. And he was like, all right, we've got this actor, Benny Elledge, who's on Broadway right now. And he's taking a 3-week gap to come down and make our film. And we've got the studio location. What can we do with those two things? And I was like, all right, let's make some sort of small town public access film, like Christopher Guest style kind of thing. Like that'll be fun. And we were great. And then that was December 2017. And then we were shooting June 2018. So the first script that I finished was, I think it was like Ides of March. It was March 15th. And that was the first time I turned in a script. And then we just went straight into pre-production. And there was no time to really step back and reevaluate the script and go, okay, what does this script need? What's working? What's not working? Because especially if you're writing it, you're going to get into the weeds. How many people have written a feature-length film? Is that anyone? Yeah. Some, yeah. So you know, if you, or who has tried to write a feature. Okay, so roughly the same, yeah. So you'll know if you've tried or if you have, you know, it's a lot. It's a lot more than you think, because when you're thinking about a film, you go, oh yeah, I can see this whole film in my head. I can see the beginning, I can see the end, and that's everything that a film is. And then you forget that there's a solid 60 minutes in the middle for a 90-minute film that you got to fill out, and it's really hard. Act 2 is a big problem. And it's something that really the best way to deal with it is rewriting. Screenwriting is rewriting, which also there's a book called Screenwriting is Rewriting, which if you haven't read, you should read it. It's great. And it really highlights the fact that in order to hone and tell the story that you want to do, you have to take time, you have to step back, and you have to re-look at everything in the screenplay, every single draft. Take a couple of weeks away, come back and go, what's working, what's not working, what do we need to hone, what do we need to fix? And we did this, I think, once with Kringle Time. We did a little bit of a rearrangement in Act 1, and then we just kind of went, all right, we gotta get into production. And if I have one cautionary tale, it's that that caused a lot more problems later on, because then as soon as we were in post-production, I went, oh, these are the problems. It has Act 1 problems in this situation. I should have moved this thing here. This scene needs to go here. We need an extra scene where these two people are here to establish their relationship. Blah, blah, blah. Oh my God, thank you. Oh, it's so fancy. I've never seen water in a tin can before. I know. Sorry, I wasn't saying that. Yes, problems with the script. The many problems with the screenplay that I wrote. Yeah, it's just one of those things where you need to take time to figure out what all of those problems are, see how it lands with people, send it to people that you trust, get a lot of feedback, and really let that process breathe for a while, rather than just saying like, all right, we gotta rush into production. I think it's imperative to make sure that you're pairing yourself with other people that kind of complement you in that sense. If you're the type of person that rushes into production, pair yourself with other producers who are going to be more cautious, right? And if you're a really cautious person, like I am most of the time, especially after this, if I'm left up to my own devices, I will constantly push off stuff, and I will just go, nah, we'll shoot it next year. We'll shoot it next year. This could be better. This could be better. My sister is the polar opposite, and I shoot a lot of stuff with her where she will just go, if left to her own devices, she'll go, all right, we're shooting today. We got to shoot something because we got to do. We're all getting older and dying. Like we got to do something. And I think having that balance within your team is a really important thing to find. Absolutely do, along those lines, make your script as lean as possible. Now, this is a huge thing, especially in micro-budget filmmaking. When you're shooting film for $40,000 or less, you don't want to shoot things that you're not going to use. This, again, was something that we did with Kringle Time because we kind of knew when we were going into production, we had about 120-page script with some rewrites that made it longer. And we knew going in that we were like, we don't want it to be a 2-hour-long film. We want it to be a 90-minute film. But we had this really dumb idea that we were like, well, we'll just shoot all of it. And then whatever doesn't work, we'll just cut it. And then we're left with the best stuff. Great, right? No, because that means you're spending a lot of time shooting stuff that is not going to work. And if you go through beforehand and you go, okay, well, we have to figure out which scenes are working, which scenes are not. And if a scene doesn't need to be there, let's not spend time on it, because that's just taking time away from the other stuff that we have to shoot. And it just means that you're going to have to be more economical with everything else. Whereas if you go into production with a lean 90-minute script, like 89-page script, you are really going to have time, because you're going to be shooting along the same period of time, probably. You're not going to shoot it in less time. You're still going to be shooting over 3 weeks, month, whatever. And if you go into production with a lean 90 pages, you can really put the time into every single one of those moments that otherwise you'd be rushing, because you're like, well, we got to get to this bullshit filler scene that Zan wrote that he doesn't want to cut, because when you look at those scenes later, especially in post, you go, I mean, we cut so much from Kringle Time. The first cut was like 2.5 hours long or something. It was just insanely long. And we cut entire storylines. We cut like all of this stuff that when you look at it afterwards, you go, when you got a little bit more objectivity, you go, oh yeah, it doesn't need that. I thought I needed that scene, but I don't. So yeah, spend time to make the script as lean as possible. Absolutely. Do not try to drink whiskey and write. We tried this. It doesn't, you're not Ernest Hemingway. You're not Hunter S. Thompson. And both of those people shot themselves. So like, it's not a good look to do. So yeah, we tried this one night on Crinkle Time. We're like, yeah, we're gonna be so cool. We're gonna be edgy. We're gonna like have a bottle of whiskey and like hammer out the screenplay. No, we got drunk and talked about Jurassic Park for 4 hours. So like, yeah, not a good idea. Absolutely do write for your actors' talents. And this goes, I think there's a kind of double part to this, right? Where it's writing for people you know is great. If you know someone, I mean, for example, Benny, the lead actor in this film, was someone who I knew. I'd seen him in stuff. I knew his kind of comedic sensibilities, and so I could write specifically for that. And I would go, okay, I know that this is his general style. This is general cadence. He can make this line funny. He can make this work. He can pull off the dramatic bits and the funny bits and all that stuff. There were certain other actors that I didn't know that. Like, for example, the woman who plays his girlfriend in the film, Gigi Edgley, was an actor from, she used to be, I don't know if, I think it was probably on before everybody here was born, but Farscape, there was a show called Farscape in the 90s that was a Jim Henson sci-fi show. It's a great show. But she was on that for a number of years, and I never really watched the show. I watched a couple episodes before I wrote the script, but I didn't really know her style. And once I met her and kind of realized, like, oh, this is your vein of humor. This is your vein of performance and all of that stuff. What I wish I'd done was go back and take another pass at the script, right? Like, if you're writing for the characters that you know, then that's great. And if not, build in time to go back after casting and go, oh, okay, so I was writing the character in this way. This person's not really that style, so let's kind of tailor it to it. Because again, then you're going to end up spending a lot more time. There were a number of times in production on this where we'd be shooting something and would be rushed in the middle of something. Like, okay, yeah, we got to get done. And Gigi would go, hold on, sorry, yeah, what is the joke? Like, what is funny about this? And I would have to be like, I just thought it was funny to hear you say my father was a snowman. I don't know. I can't explain it actually, because like, I don't know. But it was like, there's this disconnect of like, especially if you've not spent a lot of time thinking about why you think things are funny, and then you have to explain it to somebody else on the spot. It's not an ideal situation to be in. So yeah, tailor things for the people that you know, and really give them a chance to shine. If you know actors who are really solid actors, give them stuff to do. Like, that's going to make people more excited about your film. Absolutely, do not put a snowman in your film and assume that people won't think it's a Christmas movie, because they will. They will think it's a Christmas movie. Everyone will think it's a Christmas movie. And we knew this early on. I just thought snowmen were stupid, so I put one in the film. And then that's what happened. It's not a Christmas movie. Everyone thinks it is. Absolutely do. Write the film that you're equipped to make. Now, again, there are a couple of parts to this, right? I think a lot of times with micro budget film, you hear people talking about the physical constraints, right? For a small cast, single location, if you can, small locations, small cast. These are the things that are going to give you time, right, to really flesh this stuff out. And that is massively important, knowing what do we physically have the capability to do at this point. But again, but the other part of it, I think, is what film are you equipped to make on a personal level? What interests you? What's going on in the world? How can you say something with this film that's going to be different, that's going to separate it out from all of the other stuff that's out there? Because there's a lot of content. The downside of the democratization of film technology is that there's a lot of content out there. And if you are putting something out there, just put thought into, why do I want to tell this story? Because if you know why you want to tell it, then other people will be interested in it. If you are just making a movie to make a movie, and you're like, well, I just wanted to make a thing, and put it out there. Great, that's perfect. It probably is not going to land with anyone else. Because if you don't care about it, other people won't care about it. So really think about, with this one, we were making it in 2018. It was kind of like the Me Too movement had just happened. There was a lot of shakeup in Hollywood and in the world, and it was at the beginning of all of these changes that we've kind of seen playing out over the past few years. It was the middle of that. We were all, everybody making the film was kind of at a point, I was like, we're all around 30. We were at this kind of like changing point in our lives. And then also the night that we started, the night that we were first talking about ideas and throwing it around, the producer Lonnie got a text that a good friend of ours, his dad died, very, very suddenly, very unexpectedly. And then that shifted our whole conversation for the night to kind of mortality and how do you deal with death and how do you, do all of that stuff. And so all of these things were things that were very much on our mind at the time, and that we attempted to synthesize into this film, for better or for worse. I think they're all in there in the film. Again, I would like to go back and iron them out and make them a little better. But this was the film that we were equipped to make at the time, just on a personal level, because these were the issues that we were thinking about. These were the issues we were wrestling with, especially personally, like as a white man at that time, figuring out like, what ways have I been complicit in this? What ways have, do I need to change the ways that I've been operating and all of that stuff? Like all of those questions that kind of were coming up, we were dealing with them and trying to figure out like, okay, what's a way that we can be useful in this world? So yeah, the more that you care about it, the more other people will too. So going into pre-production, and also, by the way, if anyone has any like thoughts or questions or anything that doesn't make sense that I say, feel free to shout it out. Don't feel the need to wait for me. So going into pre-production, absolutely do make a budget. You might feel like you're like, well, we don't have any money. Why would we make a budget? We're just flying by the seat of our pants, right? This is going to be important for a couple of senses. Number one, making sure that you are tracking the amount of money that you are spending on it, to know that it's not just this endless hole. All of this stuff is going places. But also, again, talking about people like Ted, people who are ostensibly working for a rate much lower than they would be working for, but are giving their time and energy. They're giving their time and energy, and that is a real cost. Figure out how much this film would cost, and then be aware of that when you're working with your crew. Because the minute you start taking advantage of the crew and being like, oh, Ted's just here for free, so it's fine, we do whatever we want with him, then the vibe on set is gonna shift, right? And as long as you know the budget, as long as it's in your head that you're like, oh, Ted's rate is 5 times higher than what we're paying him. This is how much this movie is supposed to cost. It's gonna really shift the way that you're thinking about this. So make sure that you're keeping track of this stuff, even if you don't have, a man with a cigar that you have to answer to at the end of the day and give your receipts, Absolutely. Do not skimp on actors or casting. This is a huge thing for a couple of reasons. Number one, actors make a film. Like, I know I said a script makes a film, but really, if you got a great script and really bad actors doing it, or not the right actors, it doesn't necessarily have to be bad actors, but if you're casting the wrong people, your film's not gonna work. Actors make a film come alive. So I think that especially I see this a lot in like student films and stuff like that, especially like at film schools, where I think they're really focused on the technical aspects, they're really focused on the cinematography and the camera and all of that stuff. And then they go, and then we'll cast our friends. We'll just cast whoever, which is great if your friends are great actors. But if you're just casting kind of who's available as an afterthought, going like, yeah, this person will work. Yeah, it'll be fine. Your film's not ultimately going to work. So spend time, if you can afford to hire a casting agent, that's great. Having someone to go out and find people, or even if you just put a post on backstage.com, you will get, especially if you put up a post that says we will pay you literally anything, you will get thousands of actors sending in resumes and reels, because actors are hungry and they want to work. And it's worth it spending that time, because finding the right actor absolutely will change the entire dynamic of the film. And this goes not just for kind of unknown actors, but also in a more kind of business sense. When you get to the selling phase of your film, the first question any sales agent or distributor is going to ask is, who's in this film? Like, absolutely, hands down, that's the first question they're always going to ask. Because if there's a face that they can put on the poster, then they'll be like, okay, sure, yeah, I'll buy it. Yeah. My thesis advisor when I was in grad school made a film a few years ago that had Megan Fox in it. Not as a big role. She was in there for a couple of scenes, but it had Megan Fox in it. And so she didn't even have to say it when they were going to distributors and all that stuff. They just went, who's in this film? Megan Fox? Sure. Yeah, great. I don't care. I put Megan Fox on the poster, people will buy it. Cool. That's a massive thing. And I think at first, at least I had the idea at first that I was like, well, all of those actors are kind of beyond my reach, right? They're like out there. How do I even get in touch with them? You know, like they're probably doing other stuff. And I think people really underestimate how much actors want to work on scripts or on interesting scripts and want to do something different than what they've normally done. You know, like Richard Reilly, who I mentioned was in 500 Fireflies, was also in, or he was going to be in Crinkle Time. That's how we initially met him. And he's a character actor. He's been working in, you know, the stuff for years and years and years. He always plays the kind of, you know, the office type dude who wears big glasses and he has a big mustache and he goes, this is what we need to do. And he gets thrown down a flight of stairs or whatever. Like that's the character he's played for 30 years. And then, well, kind of, because after the 90s, he went, you know what, I want to do other stuff. Like, I don't want to, like, I'm working on all these big budget things, but really what I want to do is I just want to have fun and I would just want to hang out with people. And so he just started doing all of these little indies. And when you send him a script where he gets to play something other than that, he jumped at it. He just went, yeah, sure, that sounds great. And he didn't even ask about rate. He didn't ask about anything. He just went, sure, yeah, I'll take a cut. Because a lot of actors, this is not true for all actors, but a lot of actors just want to work and they want to do fun stuff. So the worst that they can say is no, or they might be something snarky. Their agent might say something snarky like, oh, well, that rate is not good for an actor of this caliber. In which case, just be like, whatever. But they're surprisingly easy to get in contact with, especially on IMDb Pro. The contact info for their managers and agents is just right there. Just send them an email, say, I got a script. It's worth a shot. You know, there's no downside to it. And if they say yes, great. It's the same thing for originally, and he had to drop out because of scheduling conflicts because we pushed because of COVID. But originally we had an actor named Clancy Brown cast in 500 Fireflies, who was a massive character actor. And
Mr. Krabs.
Mr. Krabs, yeah, played Mr. Krabs in SpongeBob. And currently is on the new season of Dexter, which is why he can be in Fireflies because our production got pushed because of COVID. But it was the same thing with him. He always played villains. He's been playing villains for 40 years now. And we sent him a screenplay where he got to play kind of a kindly old man, you know, it's like aging hippie type. And he went, yeah, sure, cool, great, I'll do it. So it's always worth a shot if you get a couple of people. And obviously those are people, these are character actors I'm talking about. These are recognizable faces, not a Brad Pitt, not a whatever. Same with Crinkle Time. We had Vernon Wells, who was in Mad Max and Commando and, you know, like all this stuff in the 80s, who was in Power Rangers. Not a name that you really know unless you are a big dork about that type of stuff. And I am a big dork about that type of stuff, and I didn't know his name. But as soon as you go, oh yeah, he's the guy with the purple mohawk in Road Warrior, people are like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, sure, yeah, I'll sell that phone. So very important. Absolutely do make friends. I've kind of hit on this a couple of times. Work on other people's stuff, build a community, find people that you want to work with, because that's ultimately what this is going to be about. You're going to be, you know, you're going to be working with people that hopefully you want to spend time with. And the more that you're doing that, the more that you're going to find in this filmmaking process. You know, like you look at shows like who watches Always Sunny in Philadelphia? Here, yeah. Are you listening to the podcast that they're putting out right now? It's great. You should. But the fascinating thing about that podcast is that you really get the sense that you're like, there's a reason this is the longest running sitcom, live action sitcom on TV, because these people love being around each other. Like they have fun and they're friends, and they, you know, it creates this energy where they end up coming up with stories after 15 years of writing these same characters. They still have stuff to do, you know, because they enjoy being around each other. So that's a huge thing. Make friends, and that's going to prove your film. And those are the people that you want to work with. Absolutely do not try to do this alone. It's the same way of saying the last thing that I just said. Find people who complement you. Find people who are going to help you in ways that that you were not personally equipped to do, right? It's really important to know your strengths and your weaknesses and go, okay, you know, personally, I'm a good like creative producer. I'm not a good like make this thing happen producer. So I know when I'm doing stuff, I'm like, I need to find somebody else to do that. You know, like on Crinkle Time, it was Lonnie. That was just like, okay, that's a guy who you just say, all right, I need a set for this thing, go. He'll do it, he'll make it happen. So find your team and find people who are gonna work. absolutely do build rest days into the schedule. If you're non-union, you're going to be thinking, well, we don't need that. Like, we've got this set period of time. We've only got the camera rented for this period of time. We need to shoot. No, you're going to die because you're going to be shooting like 15, 16 hours probably per day. And after a week, you're going to be exhausted and you need 2 days to just sleep and then come back to it. So build rest days into the schedule. We almost did this with Crinkle Time, but then Matt and I would just go like, oh yeah, we'll shoot some extra stuff on the weekends. Like it'll be fine. It'll just be like a small thing. And it was just, I was delirious by halfway into production. So build rest days, make sure you have weekends, even if you're not a union production. So going into production, what's my time right now, by the way? How am I doing? Am I talking?
It's just 11:30.
11:30, okay, all right.
There's no one in this room afterwards. So you
Okay,
can go.
sweet. All right, so we're gonna go for 4 hours. Great. Perfect. Lock the doors. All right. Absolutely do be prepared to get your hands dirty, because a producer on a high level film, on a big studio film or something like that, at that level of producers, the type of person who comes in and they have a coffee and they go, oh yeah, what's going on? They stand by the monitor and a PA rushes up to them and gives them a monitor for the headset monitor, and they watch the takes and they go, oh yeah, that's great. Okay, cool. Yeah. And then they leave. A producer on a micro budget film is every department. A producer on a micro budget film is going to be the person who is going to be filling in if somebody disappears. Going to be a PA. On Kringle Time, I had to do a beer run for one scene where Benny, the lead actor, was like, I have this really emotional monologue and like, I really want to have a beer for it. And I was like, all right, we don't have a PA, so I'm going to do it. The writer producer is the one to do it. And that's the thing, it's because it's your film, you're the one who is making this happen, and you're probably not getting paid for it, but you're the one who cares the most about, you're the one who stands to gain the most from this film. So you are the one who needs to be kind of the glue holding it all together. So be prepared to know you're not going to be the person standing behind the monitor, just going, giving the nod and the okay, and oh yeah. So for example, this is me on 500 Fireflies, dressed to be an extra in the background of a scene, and then having to fill in as the boom op because the boom op got sick and had to leave. So yeah, you're going to look absurd. And this was also in the process of, this was not the same day, but there was, or actually this might have been the day also that we were rewriting the final scene. So we were also, at the same time that we were doing all of this stuff, we were reworking the final scene of it to work around the production issues that we were having. So we were doing that at the same time. I was in the film and also boom mopping, and you're gonna do it. You're gonna look absurd, but it'll be fun. Absolutely do not expect people to work for nothing. Again, this goes along the lines of making friends, but I want to highlight it. Give people something, make people feel like they have a stake in it. And that doesn't need to, when I say nothing, I don't necessarily mean money, because people are going to know. If they're going to sign on, they're going to be knowing, okay, this is a micro budget film. You don't have a lot of money, right? You don't have to offer them money, but you just have to offer them some reason to want to be there, right? So a stake in the film, our gaffer on Kringle Time is an incredible gaffer. She's like just amazing. She turned down a gig working on Wonder Woman 1984 to work on Kringle Time, because on Wonder Woman she would have just been kind of grip and electric. She would have been just kind of showing up and doing what people said. On Kringle Time she would have been the gaffer. She would have been the department head. And she was like, yeah, that's what I want. I want to work with my friends, and I want to have that credit on my film, and I want to be able to craft the lighting in this film and have an actual kind of creative, emotional stake in this film. And she was one of the huge reasons that we got this film done, because when the rest of us were tired, she was not just a day player. She was not just somebody who was like, oh, I'm doing this as a favor for my friends. I'm like, whatever, like, I don't care. I'm just here, and being like, well, you figure that out. I'll be over here. She was the person who, when all of the rest of us got tired, she'd be like, all right, guys, like, we got to do this. Let's do this. And those are the people that you want on set. Like, you want an atmosphere where everybody is in it together and everybody feels like they are all contributing to the film in a way that when it comes out, they can say, oh yeah, that's my film. Like, I did that, rather than just being like, oh yeah, that was a thing I showed up for a couple of days. So figure out what that is, and I think it's worth reminding yourself throughout production, throughout every part of the process, really reminding yourself how many people are spending their time, money, energy, sweat, tears, blood, maybe probably, to make your film happen and making sure that they feel as close to that way as you do. Absolutely be prepared to be flexible, because filmmaking at its core is a foolish endeavor, and everything is going to go wrong. Like, that's just going to happen because you're getting a bunch of people together who've probably never all worked together before, and you're setting a pressure cooker timeline like a month or 2 months, and you're going, all right, we have to get all this stuff done, and there's a lot on the line, and everybody's kind of learning how to talk to each other at the same time, and go, all right, great. Something's going to go wrong. Something always goes wrong, you know? And this is not only true for micro-budget filmmaking. This is true for all filmmaking, you know? A friend of mine worked on Jungle Cruise, on some reshoots for the Jungle Cruise movie that just came out. And she was brought on for pickups and reshoots to kind of help manage it. And she realized when she got there, she was like, oh, we're shooting act 3 of the film. We're not shooting pickups. We're shooting act 3 because when they did the main production, they didn't have a script. Like, everything went wrong and they didn't have the end of a script. So now we're reshooting the entire end of the script. That's a Disney movie. Like, that's a huge budget thing. And she was like, and on top of that, every part of those reshoots was just an absolute clusterfuck, for like, you know, lack of a better word. These are films that have lots of money, lots of time, all that stuff. If it's happening there, it's going to happen on a micro budget film. So you got to be prepared to be flexible. You got to be prepared to kind of roll with the punches. And the thing that I've decided I'm going to say at the first day of every film that I'm ever making from now on is, for the next month, 3 weeks, whatever, 2 months, our job is to solve problems. It's not just to show up and like do the thing that we plan to do. It's to show up, figure out what problems are happening in every way, and then fix those problems. Because if you show up assuming that no problems are going to happen, you're going to get really frustrated, and then you're screwed. But if you show up going, all right, we've got a problem. We're not going to point fingers. We're not going to scapegoat, which is the thing that happens a lot on film sets. That as soon as something goes wrong, someone goes, it's that person's fault or that person's fault. And there's nothing less useful than that. And it just creates a toxic environment that it's kind of been endemic to the film industry for the past 100 years that I think we have a chance to move away from, especially with stuff like micro-budget filmmaking. Don't make a toxic environment on set. Make an environment where you go, all right, we got a problem. Let's all get together, and we're the team that needs to fix it. We're the team that should fix it. So let's figure it out. We're gonna make a movie. We get to do this. So an example of this, we wrote, for anyone who hasn't seen the film, there's a scene in the end of the film of Kringle Time that takes place in a jail. It's a jail set, which number 17, absolutely do not write a jail scene into your script. But fine. We knew it was going to be an issue when we were writing the script. We were like, we don't have a jail, you know, like, how are we going to do this? But we're like, we'll write it in, we'll think about the story now, we'll figure it out later, right? So absolutely do not ever say the words, we'll figure it out later. But so we got lucky. We partnered with some people who knew people around the Alexandria area, and they got us into an actual jail, like a real functioning jail that was going to let us shoot there. And we were like, great, it's awesome. It's terrifying because there are going to be prisoners there, but you know, staring at us.
I think actually Paul Manafort was there.
No, well, that's the
Oh, my bad.
That's okay. So yeah, they were. So yes, for anyone who doesn't remember, in 2018, there was a man named Donald Trump, who was the president, and this is true, of the United States of America for 4 years, which is crazy when you think about it. And he had been president for roughly 25 minutes when his entire campaign staff was arrested for fraud, which we don't talk about a lot nowadays, but at the time it was a big deal because his entire campaign staff was arrested for fraud and he was the president. So a week into production, we get this call from the jail, and they say, you can't shoot here. And we're in the middle of like 15-hour days. We don't have time to find another ship. We're supposed to be shooting there in like 2 weeks, and we've got actors flying in. Like, what do we do? And they're like, so we're going into media lockdown because Paul Manafort, who was one of the people on Trump's campaign staff, is going to jail here. He's being held in jail, and we're going to media lockdown. You can't come in. And so we're like, damn you, Paul! First the country, and now this. Like, God, ruin everything. So there actually is a part. There's a part in the movie where Benny's drawing on a whiteboard, and you can see at the bottom of it, he's drawn a snowman in jail and written "Polly Stronghands, get out of my jail," which is a little inside joke for anyone who's on the production. So what do you do at that point, right? Like we had Vernon Wells, of Mad Max fame, flying in from California to be in this jail in 2 weeks. We don't have any time to reset things. So what do? So you go on your checklist, right? You go, okay, is there another location we can use? Get people on that, again, building out a team that has those abilities, those connections. So say, okay, this person's going to go and see if we can get access to another jail set, right? Do another actual functioning jail. Okay, if that doesn't come through, can we build a jail set? Get the production designer, say, okay, do we have the budget? Can we like build some bars? Can we, like, how can we approximate this? We're like, well, we don't really have the budget to do that. So that won't work. Okay, option 3, can we cheat it? Get a couple of bars and then just shoot tight, like shoot just close-ups and sell it through that. Is there a way to make that work? And it's like, well, we really needed this one wide shot at the end that doesn't really work in that, so we can't really do that. So then when you get to the end of it, it's like, all right, if none of that works, is there a way to rewrite the script? Can it take place somewhere else? Because you have to shoot something. You've got the sticking clock of, all right, in 2 weeks we have to shoot somewhere, and we got to film something because we need a beat for the script. And when it comes down to it, that's in this situation, we got lucky and we found another jail that actually worked better. It was a jail that didn't have Paul Manafort or anyone else in it, so we didn't have to work around that. And it was, it ended up being fine. But if that hadn't happened, there were other situations where, like, well, we lost this location. How do we rewrite it to be somewhere else? Like, how do you get that story beat in a different way? And then how many screenwriters are there out there? Like, people who are like, screenwriting is like my thing. Yeah. So yeah, that's where the screenwriting part, the really fun screenwriting part, comes in, because that's the thing the part that I find the most fun, right, is the building blocks of, okay, you've got this puzzle. A screenplay is a puzzle, and how do you put it together in a way that is most effective? And if you take an element of the puzzle out, all right, how do we build another shape that fills that piece, right, in a slightly different way? So that's where, as long as you think of it as a fun thing and not as, oh my God, we're fucked, like, it's a fun, reworking thought process. So absolutely do not try to cut costs by not having a script supervisor and or wardrobe manager. This is a huge thing that you are going to stop paying attention to halfway through production. Like, the keeping track of who's supposed to be wearing what, especially like wardrobe wise at any given time, is the first thing that you're going to stop thinking about while you're trying to direct or produce this. So having someone on set whose job it is to know, okay, this is what, scene 118, this person needs to be wearing this shirt, these shoes, this thing, they're coming from this other scene, their hair looks like this, it's, it was wet in that scene, so it needs to be wet in this one, like keeping track of all of that stuff. Because, and this happened on Kringle Time, even with this, you still run into problems, right? We had a scene on Kringle Time where we shot a whole scene, and then we realized that one of the characters was in the wrong costume. And again, what do? You figure out a way to reshoot it, but again, you go through that checklist, right? You go, do we need that scene? Can we cut it? Nope, we can't cut it because it was a big story beat. All right, do we have time to reshoot it somewhere else? Can we add it into another scene that we haven't shot yet? Can we make that work? And we ended up just calling our actors back and being like, hey, can you come early tomorrow and we'll just try to knock out the scene again, for the second time. It's going to happen, but more that you can avoid that, the better, because it'll probably happen anyway. Absolutely do. And I've kind of said this before, a supportive creative atmosphere on set is the thing that's going to make this work. Because it's, again, I don't mean to just keep being like, this is going to be exhausting if you have to do this, but it is. It's a big ordeal. It is it's an exercise. It is like a physical athletic exercise making a micro-budget film, making any sort of film, especially at this level. It's going to be exhausting. You're going to feel insane, but. And Kringle Time absolutely was that, but also Kringle Time was some of the most fun I've had in my entire life. I was there with my friends, and I was with people who, even when they got frustrated, they'd say, all right, we're in this together and let's make it work. And yeah, I remember like, I hope this wasn't just me, Ted. I hope it was also you. But I remember laughing harder on that set than than in years, because it's just that's the when you create that atmosphere, it does hopefully bleed out into the film. And even if it doesn't, you've had a good experience doing it, and you've had a learning experience, right? Yeah, and you, as assuming if you were a producer of this film, right? If you're talking about your film, that's part of your job description. As far as I'm concerned, a huge part of the producer's job description is setting the tone on set, right? Because if you show up and you're exuding stress and you're like yelling at people and you're like doing all this stuff, day two you're going to shut down. People are just going to be like, nope, it's not worth it. I don't want to do this. But if you show up and you're exuding like, this is fun, we're going to work together, we're going to have fun, and we're going to make a movie, that's what other people will reflect back at you. And that's totally up to you to set that from the top. Because if you don't, then nobody else is going to be able to. So, shot your film. Congratulations, you did it. Got through 18 days now. Sleep for a month, and then we'll go into post-production. Absolutely do not get discouraged when you see the first cut. I think, was it Martin Scorsese or Coppola who said, if you don't get physically ill at the sight of your first cut, then something is wrong. Like that's what should happen. Because a first cut is exactly that. It's a first cut, and you're going to figure it out. Especially for comedy, like it's incredible how much comedy depends on editing, right? Like that you can see this, and you see this with kind of like you see these like extended versions of like, especially like kind of improv, like Judd Apatow style films, right? You see the extended versions and they're not as funny because they're not as trimmed down. The timing's not quite there, right? And so that's going to happen with the first cut. It's all about massaging. It's all about figuring out what elements are going to work, and you don't know that until you start to see it. I think I mentioned our first cut of Kringle Time was like 2.5 hours long, and it was not good. It was I have plenty of problems with the final cut, in terms of things that I would love to fix, but the things that did work, we just had time to kind of rework, refigure out. So don't get discouraged. Either way, you made a movie and there's time to fix it. Absolutely do be prepared to kill a few darlings, because shit's gonna happen, and you're gonna realize, again, you're gonna have scenes that you love and that you spend a lot of time on. It's always the scenes that you spend the most money on that you end up cutting. Like that's absolutely what happens every single time. And I don't know why that is, but it's true. I put together a very short reel, a couple of things that there we go. The stuff that we ended up cutting from the film. Do you know how much time and energy we put into this one shot? We rented a classic car, we built fake throw up, we got the timing, we got the actors, we got all this stuff. This girl, I felt so bad. Look how much energy she's putting into this. And I felt so bad. She's a rock star. This girl was like incredible. And we ended up having to cut her out of the film. And I felt really bad, but it was just, it didn't end up working. And she like just fully gave it her all. And I felt like so bad about it. But at the end of the day, no, don't play again.
So what's your advice on delivering that kind of news then?
Make someone else do it. No, Matt had to talk to her. Well, he did. So Matt, the director, when he told her that we had to cut those scenes, I mean, he did cut together versions of those scenes to give to her, to be like, here's this stuff for your reel. You're still going to get the credit. You're still going to, get all of this stuff. It just doesn't fit into the film. Because eventually, and that's one of those things that is different reading it on the page versus looking at it on screen, right? That character was a young version of Gigi's character, which when you read it on the page and you go, young Layla, you're like, oh, that's young Layla. And then you watch it in the film and you go, who's this girl? Like, who's this random young girl that is just hanging out in all of these shots? And we never explained it. We never, that was the thing that we didn't realize until then. So again, then you go, okay, well, you've got all these problems. You know, is there a way to fix it with voiceover, blah, blah, blah. And if there's not, you just cut it if you don't need it, you know? Don't assume that you have the money to afford to license the music that you want. Definitely shoot for the stars, you know? And again, it's not unsimilar to actors, right? Sometimes if you get in touch with a musician who you love their song and you're like, oh, I really want to use the song. Sometimes they'll go, yeah, sure, use it. Like sometimes you can reach out to a musician, you know, themselves. And if they like you and you like, you know, pitch an idea to them, you're like, I love this song and I want to use it in my film. Sometimes they'll go, yeah. But if that doesn't work, you got to go through, you got to get all of the, you know, the sync license, what's the other one? The master use license. So there are two different licenses you have to get for any piece of film or any piece of music that you want to use. And for anything that is recognizable, they are so expensive. They're so much more expensive than you would think. And they're really hard to get a hold of. Like, again, if you have the money to have a music supervisor, also great. But you're kind of stacking prices. You know, for example, like we had a Neil Diamond song in the early cuts of Kringle Time that we were just like in love with. It was just like this perfect moment that we were like, this is so funny. It's the perfect vibe. And the fact that it's Neil Diamond gives it this other kind of like recognizable thing to it. We're like, it's perfect. And we reached out and you know, after many back and forths, got in contact with them. And eventually they just went, yeah, you should license another song. Like they told us that they were like, you can't afford us. It was going to be, I mean, it was going to be $50,000 or something to license it for you know, in perpetuity, right? Because it's one thing to be like, okay, is this for the festival run? Is this for you know, US distribution, worldwide distribution? There's all these factors, but even just for like 1 year of festival runs, it's cost prohibitive, right? So it's going to be a lot of money. Definitely try it, but be prepared. Like, don't write a song into your script and go, I'm definitely going to be able to use this, whatever, Imagine Dragons song or something. And it's got to be, and I've got the characters talking about it. It needs to be in the script. Not a great idea because then you're going to be screwed. So when you're in post-production, and this was the part that until I did Kringle Time, I had no knowledge of what to do. Like I'd made a few films like this. I'd made a couple of features with like really even smaller budget than this, features with my sister. But like we would make these things and then we'd just be like, what do I do with it? I got a movie and like I have no idea what to do with this thing that I just spent all this time doing. So the biggest thing that I learned was absolutely do get a sales agent. And this, you're gonna feel at this point, like you're like, I've already spent so much, because you're gonna have spent at least 200% more money than you expected on this film at this point. And you're gonna go, do I wanna hire another person whose job it is just to go to other people and try to sell the movie? Like, is that worth my money? The answer is yes, because you've already spent all this money. This is where the sunk cost fallacy actually works, where it's just like you've spent so much money on this already. Why would you not go this extra mile to get that? So the sales agent, usually basically what a sales agent does, if you're not familiar, is they rep your film. You know, the festival part of it didn't end up happening with ours because COVID kind of changed all of that stuff. But in the modern world and in nowadays, again, now that things are opening up, a sales agent's going to rep your film to festivals. They're going to send it to distributors. They're going to talk it up. They're going to, you know, they're going to do all of that networking, and they've got this set of networks that they're going to pitch it to, right? And you're paying for those connections, but not only for those connections. So generally they'll just charge a fee up front, and that's the sticking point where you're like, is this a racket? You know, that like I'm paying this person $3,000, and then in theory they could just come back and go, well, nobody wants it, sorry, you know. And that's a possibility. It's possible that you would go through that whole thing and then get to the end of it and be like, well, I'll just put it up on Vimeo, I guess, because, you know, again, that's a possibility. But this is how people get films sold. And there is a palpable difference between your film coming from a sales agent versus coming from you. Like you could get all of the emails for the people at all of these distribution companies and go, I'll just, you know, I'm just going to cold call them, email them, all of this stuff. They're going to ignore you. But if it comes from, you know, Glenn Reynolds at Circus Road Films, they'll go, oh, I know Glenn. Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll watch this. So that was a huge thing for us, because I realized that we eventually ended up getting a deal through Gravitas Ventures. And I realized that the person who we talked to at Gravitas was actually somebody that I'd met at Austin Film Festival a few years ago, and I had his email address. And I was like, we just paid a guy $3,000 to send an email to this guy whose email I already had. Is that what we just did? And for a second, I was like, oh my God, why didn't I just email that dude? Like I could have, but the number one, it was very different coming from a sales agent versus coming from me, a random person. And number two, the huge thing, the main reason that I would say get a sales agent is that sales agent is not only going to help sell the film, but once you have sold the film, they are gonna know the contract and they're gonna go through the contract with you and they're gonna make sure that you're not getting screwed on the contract and they're gonna rework it to be as good as possible for you. And that's a massive thing because when they send over that contract, it's overwhelming. There's a lot of stuff in it that doesn't make any sense. And if you have someone whose job it is to look at contracts like that, who you've hired to be on your side and to do that, that's worth the entire 3,000. And in theory, for us, we got in the distribution deal, we got a minimum guarantee that, which is like an upfront payment, basically for the film that covered the cost of the sales agent. So it's like, all right, we made a little bit of money. We made 3,000 less than we would have made otherwise, but we still made, we came out above the level of going in the hole,
The kind of transparency you get of the like, is this a racket of the number of steps that have?
So we went with ours. It was a dude named Glenn Reynolds, who was a lovely man who I highly recommend for anyone who is doing this. He was pretty transparent with his stuff. He has a portal basically where you could like log on at any given time and you can see, all right, I've gone out to these companies, these people are still considering it, these people have passed, these people, say yes and they want to talk, like here are the yeses, here are the nos, here's all this stuff. Here's where we've gone out to subscription video on demand, here's where we've gone out to transactional, like here's where here are all of these various different aspects, and this is where we are in this process. So yeah, that was one of the things that I thought was great about our experience with him, was that he was super transparent about it, and just a chill dude. So yeah, highly recommended. There's another guy, Blood, Sweat, Honey Films, who's Alex something, I can't remember his name, but a friend of mine also used him for as a sales agent. He was great. So yeah, highly recommended, because if you get to that point and you don't go the extra mile to get it sold, then kind of like what did you just spend your last few years doing, so absolutely do not panic when you can't afford the music that I told you wouldn't be able to afford, even though you didn't listen to me. If you get to this point, which this might happen after you've sold the film, right? Because you can sell the film and then you go, okay, now we have to deliver it. All right, so now we have to actually figure out, do we have the rights to all of this stuff? So for us, we sold it and then we had to replace a couple songs because we realized we couldn't afford them. There's always a way to make it work without the Neil Diamond song. We figured it out, another song that worked. For a couple of the songs, we just re-recorded our own versions of stuff. It was like, okay, well, we can't afford this song, but this is, like this song was a traditional song that was covered by this other person. So I'll just ask my friend, like, hey, if I toss a couple $100 your way, like, would you be able to record your own version of this song? And they go, yeah, sure. Always doable. Again, like making friends, making contacts, and just like knowing people who would get into this stuff. But also like knowing that that there has to be something in it for them too, right? Like my friend who I got to record that cover of it of Samson and Delilah for Kringle Time was it was during COVID and he was a musician and he had just left his job and he was like, I'm just hanging out and I'm not doing anything and I want something to do. And I was like, I've got something for you to do. Great. So yeah, it's all about, don't burn your bridges, figure out ways that people are going to actually get into this stuff. So also do plan your festival strategy based on your film. You've got a film now. You've got a film and it's finished and you can look at it and go, great, this is exactly how good it's going to be and how bad it's going to be. Like this is the extent of it, right? there's a number of aspects you want to think about when you're thinking about your festival strategy. Ideally, you want to premiere at a big film fest, as big as you can get. And also film fests in general, like a premiere. If you can say this is the world premiere, it's more attractive to them, especially for the big ones. A lot of the time for a micro budget film, places like Sundance are not really showing micro budget films anymore. They say they're independent, but they're not. So it's for a micro budget film, most likely you're not going to be at that level. You're not going to be at the Sundance, South by, any of that stuff, unless you're just like the next Wunderkind and you just blow everyone out of the water. It's possible. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but it's not likely. But there's a whole other range of kind of mid-tier. Like we premiered at Brooklyn Film Fest, which is a nice little indie festival in New York. Got like a nice little write-up in the Village Voice about it, which is cool. So we knew after we watched our film, we looked at it and went, all right, what level is this film? It's not Sundance level, it's not South by level. This is maybe we could get into Austin Film Fest. That was I don't think we ended up, did we end up even, I don't remember if we ended up spinning or not, but we didn't screen at Austin. But we knew it was around that kind of level, that mid-tier level, right? And I think that's important to look at and go, okay, well, these deadlines are at this time, and the best way to get into all of these festivals is to submit at these specific times, right? So it's worth thinking about. So it's a lot of, I think, yeah, what time is it? We're an hour in. Okay, cool. That's good because I'm at the end of the thing. So a lot of various kind of things that we've talked about, but the absolute most important thing that I want to end with is absolutely do this with people you love. Because if you're not, what are you doing? And I've touched on this a couple of times, but I just want to highlight at the end of it, this film, the hope, right? What's your hope in making a micro budget film? Your hope is that it's going to make you $1 million and skyrocket you to stardom. Neither one of those things is probably going to happen, and that's fine. That's just the nature of what it is. Again, it could happen. There are, times where that happens. But those are not things that you have in your control, because things are going to go wrong. Things, it's going to be a learning experience. You're going to figure out how to do all of this stuff, and you're going to be working with constraints that are not fully within your control, right? The things that you are going to get out of this film, you are going to have made a film that otherwise you would not have, and that's massive. It is always better to make a film than to not make a film. To look back, I mean, again, I have plenty of problems with Pringle Time, but I'm so glad that we made it, because I'm like, otherwise I wouldn't have a film. You're going to have a film that you otherwise would not have made, and it's going to be a learning experience. That's the huge part of this, is no matter what, every single time you do something, you are going to learn how to do it better the next time. And that's massive. And the best way to do that is to do it with people you love. Because if you're not having a good experience, then you're not going to want to do it again. But if you can look back at it and go, yeah, I had some of the greatest, times of my life working on this film, even if it went nowhere, even if you just end up putting it on Vimeo, you can at least go, all right, well, I learned a lot and I had fun with my friends, and we did a thing. We exercised our brains. We did a lot of stuff. So that's the end of it. So yeah, go forth and make some films, you guys, because there's a lot of film that can happen in Virginia these days. You don't need to go to New York. You don't need to go to LA anymore. If you're making this level of film, you don't need the infrastructure. You can do it anywhere, and you can tell whatever stories you want. So yeah, that's it. That's all I got. Thanks, guys. Thoughts? I know we're over. I don't know.
No, you can keep on going.
Okay, cool. Yeah. But any questions or thoughts, or if there's anyone on the chat who has thoughts, or yeah,
Can you talk about did you hire a casting agent, and what was that like, and what did it cost?
For this one, I don't think we did. We talked about it, but most of the people we cast were either people that we already had connections with, or people that we got through those connections. Oh, actually, that reminds me of something else that I meant to bring up. Once you've got someone on, I mean, we got Vernon through Gigi, because Richard really had dropped out because he had this emergency surgery that he couldn't be there for. And so frantically, we were like looking for, all right, who can play this big character in this film. And so we talked to Gigi, who had been on Farscape and knew a bunch of people, worked with a lot of people, and we said, okay, who do you know who you might want to work with? And she was like, well, there's this guy Vernon Wells, who's a fellow Australian, and like he might do it. So she just called him up and she was like, Vernon, do the fucking film. Literally, that's what she said. And then he did the film. But that's a huge thing, and that's actually something that I wish I had learned. I wish I had learned on Kringle Time, because I didn't apply it to 500 Fireflies when Clancy Brown had to drop out. I realized this moment after I picked Richard Really up from the airport and was driving him to set, and we were chatting, and he was like, yeah, I've been watching this show Mythic Quest. Have you watched it? It's a show that about my buddy Murray sent me a text the other day, and he said, Richard, I'm on this show. It's called Mythic Quest, and you should watch it. And I was like, oh, cool, yeah, no, I haven't watched it. And he was saying it, and I went, Murray. And then I realized that I was like, oh, he means F. Murray Abraham, like the Oscar winner F. Murray Abraham, who was in Amadeus and Grand Budapest Hotel and all that stuff. And I was like, and this was after we had gone through this whole thing of being like, we need to find another character another person to replace Clancy, and like, who could we find, and like, doing all of this stuff ourselves, and like not hiring a casting agent. And then I realized that I was like, if you have an actor like Richard Really in your film, who is, character actor, but has been around, knows a lot of people, the best thing you can do at that point is go, hey, Richard, like, who do you know who might be interested? Who do you want to work with? Like, and if he had said, oh, my buddy F. Murray Abraham wants to be in this movie, then you've got F. Murray Abraham in your movie. You could put Academy Award winner F. Murray Abraham, and he'll do anything. F. Murray Abraham was in a movie called Blood Monkey. Like, he. Anyway, so that was a slight divergence from your thing. But yeah, we for this stuff, we did not hire a casting agent. But if you can afford to do it, it's a huge help to have somebody who has the contacts, knows the people who would be best for these roles. So yeah, there was, or actually we did do it for some of the kids, now that I'm thinking about it. There's a guy named Bjorn Munson in DC, who was great, who found us a lot of we have a bunch of children who are in the film, and I don't know how to find children, so we were like, yeah, get child actors. Also, if you have child actors on your set, absolutely get a person to manage the child actors, because we did for a few days, and then a couple of days we didn't have them, and we're like, this is so good. But partially just from a perspective of like, obviously you want the parents to feel safe, being like, oh yeah, I'm giving you my children, but also just getting the kids out of your hair, because they're going to be excited because they're on a film set, so yeah. We did have also one day when we were recording the scene where all of the kids scream, "Oh no, Ken Starr," and we were rehearsing it with the casting, or with the child manager, and one of the parents came in and was like, "Yeah, is everything going well in here?" And at that exact moment, all of the kids go, "Oh no, Ken Starr!" And the parents are like, did they just say Ken Starr? Okay, all right. Like, yeah, too late. Your kid's here now. It's gonna be anyway, yeah. Yeah, I think that answered your question, Kevin.
So you gave a ballpark figure of $50,000. Could you give a rough breakdown of where that 50,000 came from?
Yeah, that's a good. We have that written somewhere. I should have brought it actually. Yes. Oh, where it came from?
Yeah.
Funding wise?
Yeah, not like where it went. I mean,
oh,
if you
yeah,
want to talk
the,
about where it went to, that's
okay,
good
yeah,
too. But like, what was
right.
the source of the?
The source of it was mostly a lot of that came from Matt. Like some of it was coming from Matt. I put in a chunk of it. I think I put in I'm probably around 5,000-6,000 by the end of it. But Matt put in a chunk, and then Matt had a few other friends who basically who came to him and said, hey, if you ever want to make a movie, I'll chip in $5,000, so finding angel investors like that is great. The best, I was talking to the producer on that Megan Fox film that I mentioned. I was chatting with him before we did Fireflies about like, okay, what are the best ways to kind of raise money for stuff like this? And he was like, well, the main thing you want to do is target high net worth individuals, like go for the people who just have a lot of money. And I was like, great, cool. So yeah, I'll just go through my Rolodex and pull out all of the billionaires that I know. Yeah, that sounds great. But that is really, you know, if you can get contact with those people, like those are the people that you want, because they kind of know that they're not going to make any money off of this, right? They kind of have to be aware that they're like, I'm probably never going to see this money again. I'm going to be an angel investor. This is like, I'm rolling the dice. Like this is a gamble. And I'm not assuming that I'm going to see this money again. For Fireflies, we got most of it from one person. It was this friend of my sister, my brother-in-law's, who just inherited a lot of money and is like a super liberal, like nobody should be a billionaire type person, and he inherited like $1 billion or something, and so he just gives it away to people, and he just goes like, yeah, he like finds people he likes, and he just goes like, oh yeah, here you go. So he gave us like $90,000, or he gave us 60,000, and then we ended up putting another try, so it got up to about 80,000-90,000 by the end of it, but yeah, most of it's kind of angel investor type people, but there are also a lot of grants and various other initiatives that you can apply for and get money through, but we just didn't do any of those for that. But yes, Kate.
Yeah, for those like investor types, did you feel like there were the certain hoops you had to jump through to make them feel like engaged and informed and like that part of the process, even if because usually sometimes there is that novelty factor of like,
Yeah.
I'm part of this thing as opposed to like, I'm going to profit from this thing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time it's just like, oh yeah, show up on set and have fun, and you know, like invite them to set, and that's fine. And a lot of the time, if they're giving you that much money and they don't care about it, they're probably pretty chill, you know. So I mean, like Bill, our angel investor on Fireflies, came by one day, and we just, you know, he just kind of
Thank you.
and yeah, he just wanted to be on set. He wanted to, you know, kind of look around and have fun and exist with people. Again, talking about having good atmosphere on set, like, you know, make it an atmosphere that if somebody is giving you $80,000 for a film, that they can come and hang out and, you know, have fun. And especially if you've got like you know, again, like Richard was, I think it's funny because like Richard really is like, he was like my favorite character actor growing up. So it's like weird that I'm like, nobody else knows his name. Like, it's not like, he's not like a Brad Pitt kind of type person, but he's one of those people that you recognize. And he was like, I remember being in like high school and being like, who is this guy who shows up in every movie? And I remember looking him up and being like, I want to work with that guy someday. So like, for me, it was like a huge thing being able to like work with him. But for like, yeah, someone like Bill who can show up and be like, oh, now I get to chat with the dude from Office Space about like what it was like to work on Casino or whatever, you know. It's just like a fun atmosphere to have. So yeah, definitely don't take it for granted that these people are giving you lots of money. Yep.
Yeah, so I wrote a lot of context in this question.
Okay, yeah.
But I'm an animator and I'm interested in making like animated films largely. And I have known people, one of my friends was a lead animator on something that won the animation category at Sundance last year. And as far as I know, it was a team of like 3 of them. It was like her and like the directors, basically. And, you know, I don't know what they went through in terms of like the process and everything, but, you know, I was thinking like, you said like, don't do this alone and yada, yada, right? And that's obviously like very important. Like I made my thesis film in 2.5 months, which was like 4.5 minutes of animation, which if anybody knows anything about animation, that's like impossible. And
It's a lot,
I
yeah.
was unwell and it was just not great. Yeah. So for me, that kind of did suck the fun out of it. You know, I wish that I had had a team and I wish I had had like those resources to do that. But it happened and, you know, it is what it is. But yeah, and I was thinking about your jail problem and not being able to find that. And like what I would have done in that situation would have been like, well, I'm just gonna make it out of cardboard and paint it and then composite it in After Effects, and like then it'll be like a multimedia thing and it might be cool.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, like I'm curious like how you feel about like all the stuff that you said, like is obviously very relevant, but like do you think that there's like a distance between that
animation
stuff and like
live
animated
action.
film? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have because I have no skill with animation, even though it's an art form that I really love. I mean, like I am a massive. I'm not wearing my Monsters University hat today, but like I absolutely love everything that Pixar has ever done. And yeah, so I don't have a lot of experience like personally with it, but I think, yeah, in certain respects, in terms of building the teams and like making sure that you're not getting tunnel vision, like there's a level of that where it's even more of a danger with animation, like you said, where it's like, oh yeah, well, in theory, if like with making a live action film, you literally can't do it alone unless you're Bo Burnham. Like you have to, and even he had other people helping him out with that, right? But like with animation, you in theory can just sit and be like, well, I'll just animate this whole thing myself, you know? So right, yeah, and so it's like it's way easier to get into, I assume, into like kind of that tunnel vision mindset that you do get into with live action as well, but having the ability to toss it to other people and go, okay, what do you think about this? Like, what do you here, I'll give you the edit, or whatever, even if it's just a couple of people. I mean, I know that who was it? Matthew Cherry, who did Hair Love, that won the short animated Oscar a couple years ago. I know that he, I remember seeing that he made he had like a concept, I think a concept film for his thing, and just tweeted. Basically, he was like, I've got an Oscar-worthy short film premise that I need help with, and I need money, but I can, like, he literally said, this is an Oscar-worthy film that I want to make. Who can help me make this film? And he found some collaborators through that. And then, I mean, if you look at the final credits of that film, it's a 5. Is anyone who's seen this film? Do you remember this, Hair Love? It's a great film. If you haven't, it's on YouTube. Yeah. But yeah, if you look at the credits for that, it's extensive, like huge lines of animators. But it was just one dude going, I need help with this thing, and then seeing who wants to come on board. And I think he got some grants and stuff to make it happen. But yeah, I don't know if that actually answered your question or not. Did it?
Yeah. I mean, I just was wondering, like, I mean, it seems like you mentioned like a lot of roles for like so many different people to have specific jobs. And like for me, like when I made my film, I was the sound designer, I was the editor, I did everything. So
yeah,
like how necessary do you think all of that?
All that is, yeah. I mean, it does help. Like with ours, we originally had, because there's a certain level with post-production that is probably a one-to-one kind of thing, right? Where it's like with ours, we originally had an editor who was going to cut it, and he did like kind of a first like half of the film pass, and then he got hired by Disney, and he was like, I'm busy, guys, I can't, I've just mailed us the hard drives back. So it ended up being Matt, the director, who over COVID just sat down and he was like, all right, I'm just gonna edit this film. And he got super into the weeds in that the whole thing, but he at least had Ted to send it to for the sound design. And then he had me and Lonnie and Wes, who was the DP, and a couple of other people to kind of send it to. A couple of producers. We had a producer named Rick who gave us some money, who would also give kind of feedback on the cuts. But he had us to send it to go, all right, I've stared at this for hours and hours and hours. Like, tell me what's working, what's not working. Let's talk through all of that stuff. And that is a huge part of that, to have people who are invested in it, who are not just like your family and like, the significant others and stuff like that, where it's like, they're just gonna be like, yeah, sure, cool, that's great, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I will say that I think having a level of control like that, what you're describing sounds much closer to like what I did on my thesis film, the short film that I mentioned, where I ended up doing the sound design and the mostly the color, and I ended up editing it and like all of that stuff. And I do feel much more of a sense of ownership over that film, but there were times where I did get stuck because I was just like, I don't know if this is working or not. I honestly can't tell. So yeah, but it's also a question again of like time, taking time away from it and coming back to it, and then you can see all the problems with it. So yeah, it's the cheap, fast, and good thing is the core of all of this. If you're by yourself, it's gonna not be fast.
Yeah.
But it could be cheap and good, But tell me, by the way, when I need to.
I mean, our next workshop's at 1, but.
Okay, all right. Cool. I'm good to hang out for however long.
Building off of that question, and this comes from a little bit of background knowledge, but could you talk about the process of getting to doing Kringle Time? Like where did Matt and Benny meet for the first time? And also you talked about your thesis film, and how did that help you sort of prepare you to do a feature length?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, so Matt and Benny, which you already know, but for everyone else. yeah, so Matt and Benny met, well, they knew, how did they originally? Because they knew each other from years
Actually,
back.
I don't know where they
Oh,
were.
okay,
I'm
yeah.
curious.
No, they met, I think when Matt was in New York, Matt had been living in New York, and I think Benny, maybe met him in college. I can't remember. They knew each other from years and years ago. But then they had worked together. I think you and I both met Benny originally on Matt's thesis film, which was a short film that he, like a 15-minute little sci-fi thing called Moonshot. It's also great if you, I think it's
On Amazon
Is it on
Prime?
Amazon Prime?
It
Yeah,
is.
it's on Amazon Prime. You can check it out. Yeah, Benny was in that, and that was kind of the first thing that I think they've worked on film-wise. So we kind of, yeah, met Benny through that. But it really was just, I mean, I think Matt met him years ago and just kind of went like, this is a talented dude. I think that's the thing, like when you meet those people where you're like, this guy's fun and they're talented and they're fun to work with, like, I want to work with them. And for me, that was actually, talking about Last Strike, which Ted also worked on for way cheaper than he should have. This is the thing, find yourself a Ted Hoagland. Everybody find a Ted Hoagland. With that, Alyssa, who played one of the roles in Kringle Time, who played Daphne, the kind of station manager in Kringle Time. She was an old friend of mine who was in a Shakespeare troupe in Stanton, who I met when I was a teenager. She was like in the troupe, and I was in like the young company, like it was like a theater camp thing. And so she was like the cool, like, 20-something Shakespeare performer. I was like, oh my God, that's awesome. So I knew her from way back then. And then when I was making my thesis film, I heard that she was in DC, and I sent her a Facebook note, and I was like, oh, I've got this, thing. There's a role that I think you might be really good for. Like, would you mind sending in a read? And she did, and she was great. And then, so we ended up casting her in that. And then when it came time to do Kringle Time, I was like, all right, well, who are the actors that I want to work with? So I was like, well, I know I'm writing for Benny. And then I was like, and I know that I've got Alyssa, who's really funny, and she can do drama, she can do comedy. And it's like, again, it's talking about what's the film that you're equipped to make, right? What's the film that you have the resources to go, all right, this is a resource that I can tap. I'm like, I know I have Benny Elledge, who's a rock star, and I've got Alyssa Wilmuth-Geoghegan, who is also a rock star, and I want to write her something that is going to take advantage of her skills, and give her something fun to do. And she said after, because I sent her the script, I was like, I wrote this role for you if you want it. And the role, for anyone who's not seen the film, is she's like a internalized misogyny, like hard hitting, station manager kind of type person. Basically the type of woman who grew up in the 80s and internalized the only way to make it in film is just or in film and TV is just to roll with it and act like a dude and accept the sexism and all of that stuff. And so now she's this hard hitting, really bitter, angry station manager who's just trying to hold on to power. And she responded, and she was like, is this what you think of me? And I was like, no, I wanted to give it, because it was it's so different from who she is as a person, that I was like, I want to give her something fun to play with. I want to give her some, something fun to do. So yeah, but she ended up having fun with it, I think. So yeah, anyway, yeah. And so along those lines with Last Strike, with my short film, there is, again, I think I started out in the very beginning talking about this, that the experience of really going full force with a short and saying how I'm going to make this as good as I possibly can. I'm not going to be thinking about this as a short film. I'm going to be thinking about this as I want something that is going to be as good as it possibly can. And it's really scary to do that, because then you have that feeling of if I do this and I make this, give my all to this thing, and I pour my soul into it, and I try to make something that really represents me, and then it sucks, that's scary. That's a danger, what do I do in that circumstance? But again, I think if you do put yourself into it, it is going to end up good. It is going to connect with other people. If you care about it, then other people will care about it. That's what it comes down to. So, yeah.
You mentioned knowing that your film wouldn't fit into certain festivals. So how do you gauge your level for your film and knowing where to submit it?
I mean, I think that is another thing that a sales agent would help a lot with, because they know all of the festivals, and they in a non-COVID world, they'll go to the festivals themselves and talk up the film and go, oh yeah, I've got this film I'm selling or whatever. And they kind of know that they'll be able to realistically say, okay, this is the type, because it's not just like the tier of festival, but it's like the type of festival, right? Where it's like, okay, well, this festival really likes, small indie dramas, or this film really likes kind of like horror type films, or like this, there's so many film festivals out there these days. And there's a lot of them that are kind of rackets, that are just like, they charge you a fee and then they give you a laurel, and you go, all right, yeah, you got a laurel, great, cool. And you're just like, oh yeah, I just paid for that. Like, just gave a person money. Like, that's all I got out of that, but the sales agents, that's kind of their world, is knowing all of that stuff. And I don't think I mentioned this, but the film fest circuit I think it is an important part of the sales process. Cause we had already gotten a deal before we screened in Brooklyn. But after we screened in Brooklyn, we got an email, Matt and I both got an email from someone at one of the distribution companies that had passed on us before, when Glenn went to them and saw the film at Brooklyn Film Fest and went, hey, do you guys have a distributor? Because I like this, I saw your film and I love to do it. And I was like, haha, no, we're doing hot girl shit now. You can't do that. So there is something to be said for screening at a festival and having that kind of especially, like I said, like we got a little, short blurb in the Village Voice because of that. And that, I'm sure, was maybe something that she saw and went, oh, well, they're in the Village Voice, so it must be good, right? So yeah, there's a depressingly large amount of kind of like shallowness to some of that selling, but it's, use that to your advantage,
Thank you.